It was an ordinary Tuesday when I found out. That's the thing about life-changing moments. They rarely announce themselves. There's no dramatic music, no warning sign, just the sudden shift where everything you thought you knew fractures like thin ice beneath your feet. I wasn't snooping. I need to make that clear. David had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered, and when the notification chimed, I glanced over automatically. Force of habit. The preview was brief but unmistakable. Can't wait to feel you again tomorrow night. Our spot, 8 p.m., don't be late this time. The message was from Emily K. Work. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone. I knew his passcode. We'd always had an open phone policy. Nothing to hide, that was our thing. Or so I thought. I tapped in the 4 digits, my heart slamming against my ribs. The text thread opened, and time seemed to fold in on itself. Messages stretched back months, flirtations, photos, plans, for meetups that conveniently aligned with David's late nights at the office, a parallel relationship happening right alongside our marriage of 11 years, Emily Keller, the new marketing director, 28 to my 39. I'd met her at the company Christmas party just 3 months ago. She'd complimented my earrings while standing beside my husband, her hand resting casually on his forearm. I remembered thinking she was charming. I heard the shower shut off upstairs. With mechanical precision, I returned the phone to its exact position on the counter, then moved to the sink and picked up a coffee mug, pretending to wash it as my world crumbled silently around me. Morning. Babe, David said, coming up behind me, pressing a kiss to my neck. He smelled like his expensive body wash, the one I'd gifted him for our anniversary. What's on your agenda today? I scrubbed at the already clean mug, focusing on keeping my voice steady. Just the usual. Might meet Tara for lunch. Nice, he said, reaching around me for his phone. Did his fingers hesitate for a millisecond? Did he check to see if I'd seen anything? I couldn't tell. After 11 years of marriage, I suddenly couldn't read his face at all. I've got a late meeting tomorrow. Don't wait up for dinner. No problem, I replied, the lie slipping easily from my lips. I've got plenty to keep me busy. That night, as David slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and contemplated my options. Option 1, the confrontation. Wake him up, shove the phone in his face, and demand answers. Let the tears flow, voices rise, watch him stumble through explanations and apologies. Option 2, quietly file for divorce. Contact a lawyer, secure my finances, prepare for the end with clinical detachment. Option 3, revenge. The idea came to me fully formed, like a gift from a darker part of myself I'd never acknowledged. Emily Keller had a husband. Michael Keller, a quiet, bespectacled man who'd stood in the corner at that same Christmas party, nursing a whiskey, looking slightly out of place among the corporate crowd. I remembered him because David had mentioned that he was some kind of professor at the university downtown. Smart guy, David had said, but not really the social type. I reached for my laptop on the nightstand and opened Facebook. It didn't take long to find him. Michael Keller, associate professor of literature at Westlake University. His profile showed a thoughtful-looking man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The type who'd quote poetry in casual conversation. The kind who probably didn't deserve what was happening to him. I checked his recent posts. He'd mentioned looking forward to a department dinner on Friday night. Emily would have an excuse to be out. The pieces were aligning. With trembling fingers, I opened a private browser window and created a new email address. Then I drafted a message. Dear Professor Keller, we haven't formally met, though we have mutual connections. I'd like to discuss something of great importance to both of us. Would you be available to meet for dinner this Wednesday at Maison Laurent at 8 p.m.? I'll reserve a table under the name Claire Sullivan. This matter is rather delicate, so I'd appreciate your discretion. Sincerely, Claire. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then deleted the email from my sent folder. I'd used my middle name, Sullivan being my mother's maiden name, untraceable enough but not completely fabricated. Tomorrow, I'd make the reservation. And then I'd wait. Wednesday arrived with the weight of inevitability. David left for work with a quick kiss and his usual, "love you." The words felt like pebbles in my mouth when I returned them. "See you tomorrow," he said casually as he left. "Don't forget I have that late meeting tonight." I nodded, watching him go, wondering if this would be the last normal moment between us. The door closed, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Michael had replied to my email the previous day with a brief message. "I'll be there." MKI spent the day in a strange, detached state, moving through my routines like an actress performing familiar scenes. I edited manuscripts for my publishing clients, I'd switched to freelance work 5 years ago, answered emails, and made small talk with the barista at my regular coffee shop. All while carrying the weight of what was to come. At 6:30, I stood before the mirror in our bedroom, studying my reflection. I'd chosen a black dress, not overtly sexy but elegant, with a silhouette that reminded me of my confidence from younger days. I applied my makeup with precision, opting for a bold red lip that I rarely wore anymore. David once told me he loved that color on me. I wondered if Emily wore it for him now. I fastened the diamond earrings he'd given me for our 10th anniversary, watching them catch the light. Then I slipped my wedding ring off and placed it in my jewelry box. Tonight, I would go as simply myself, not as David's wife. Maison Laurent was a 30-minute drive across town, an upscale French restaurant with intimate lighting and discreet service. The kind of place perfect for affairs and confrontations alike. I'd requested a table with a clear view of the entrance and another specific table near the back, the one I knew David would request. He was nothing if not predictable in his patterns, always asking for the quiet corner table whenever we dined out. I arrived 15 minutes early, parking my car where it wouldn't be immediately visible from the entrance. As I stepped into the restaurant, the maitre d' greeted me with practiced warmth. "Reservation for Claire Sullivan," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Of course, Miss Sullivan, your table is ready. And your guest has already arrived." My heart skipped. Michael was early. I hadn't planned for that. The maitre d' led me through the dimly lit restaurant to a corner table where Michael Keller sat, looking slightly uncomfortable in a navy blazer over a light blue shirt. He stood as I approached, his expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Professor Keller," I said, offering my hand. "Thank you for coming." His handshake was firm but gentle. "Please call me Michael," he said, his voice softer than I'd imagined. "And you're Claire?" I nodded, taking my seat as the waiter appeared with water and menus. Michael studied me with intelligent eyes that seemed to be trying to place me. "I have to admit," he said after the waiter left, "I'm intrigued by your invitation. You mentioned mutual connections?" I took a sip of water, buying myself a moment. "Yes, though before we get to that, I think we should order. This conversation might require a drink." He raised an eyebrow but nodded. When the waiter returned, I ordered a glass of Cabernet, and Michael chose a scotch, neat. "You're not what I expected," he said once our drinks arrived. "What did you expect?" "I'm not sure. Your email was mysterious. Professional but urgent." He tilted his head slightly. "Are you one of my students' parents? Or perhaps from the university administration?" I shook my head, then glanced at my watch. 7:48 p.m. If David kept to his usual timing, he'd arrive with Emily in about 15 minutes. I needed to move this conversation forward. "Michael," I said, leaning slightly over the table, "what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. But I believe you deserve to know the truth." His expression sobered. "I'm listening." I took a deep breath. "My name isn't Claire Sullivan. It's Rebecca Wells. My husband is David Wells. He works at North Star Marketing." I paused, watching as confusion flickered across his face, followed quickly by the dawning of understanding. "Your husband," he started, "is having an affair with your wife," I finished for him, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael went very still, his fingers tightening around his scotch glass. For a moment, I feared he might not believe me, might stand up and walk out, might cause a scene. Instead, he took a long drink, set the glass down carefully, and asked, "How long?" "At least 3 months from what I've seen. Possibly longer." He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the table. I suspected something, he said quietly. Emily's been different, distant, working late more often. I told myself I was being paranoid. The raw pain in his voice mirrored what I'd been feeling for the past day, that unique anguish of having your worst fears confirmed. I found out yesterday, I told him. A text message on David's phone. Why are you telling me this? Michael asked, looking back up at me. There was no anger in his eyes, just a deep, questioning sadness. And why here? Why tonight? I glanced at my watch again. Svepan, because they're meeting here tonight. At 8 o'clock, his eyes widened. This is a setup. I prefer to think of it as an opportunity for truth, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. They'll be here any minute. David thinks I'm at home, unaware. Emily presumably told you she had other plans. A department function, he said bitterly. How convenient that I had one too. So we both had the night free, I said with a grim smile. Michael ran a hand through his hair, his breathing quickening. What's your plan here? A public confrontation? Humiliation? Justice, I said simply. Clarity. I don't know exactly how this will play out, but I do know that living with lies is no longer an option for me. And I thought you deserved the same choice. He was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he asked, Do you still love him? The question caught me off guard. Did I? After 11 years, love had become so woven into the fabric of my life with David that it was hard to separate from habit, from comfort, from the shared history of our marriage. I love who I thought he was, I finally answered. But that person doesn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did. Michael nodded, understanding in his eyes. I've spent 15 years with Emily, built a life, planned a future. And now? His words trailed off as his gaze shifted to something over my shoulder, his face draining of color. I didn't need to turn around to know what he'd seen. They're here, he whispered. I took a steadying breath. Together? He nodded slightly. Do they see us? No, he said. They're following the host to a table in the back. I felt a strange calm settle over me. In about 30 seconds, David will look around the room. It's a habit of his. He always surveys restaurants when he sits down. When he does, he'll see us. Michael took another drink of his scotch, emptying the glass. What do we do when that happens? We don't do anything, I said. We just continue our dinner. The next move will be theirs. And so we sat, two strangers united by betrayal, waiting for the moment our worlds would collide. It happened exactly as I'd predicted. Through the reflection in the decorative mirror, on the wall beside us, I could see David and Emily being seated at the corner table. David's hand rested briefly on the small of her back as she sat down, an intimate gesture I recognized all too well. Then, true to habit, he glanced around the restaurant, his eyes sweeping across the room until they landed on our table. I watched. The reflection as his expression morphed from casual interest to shock, his body going rigid. Emily, noticing the change, followed his gaze. Her reaction was more dramatic, her hand flying to her mouth, eyes widening. Michael, who had been watching them directly, turned back to me. They've seen us, he said unnecessarily. I nodded, taking a sip of my wine. Now we wait. We didn't have to wait long. Within moments, David was approaching our table, his face a mask of controlled panic. Emily remained at their table, looking as though she might be sick. Rebecca, David said when he reached us, his voice strained with forced casualness. What a surprise. I thought you were home tonight. I looked up at my husband, studying his face as if seeing it for the first time. The laugh lines around his eyes, the slight gray at his temples that had appeared last year, the faint scar on his chin from a childhood accident, all so familiar yet suddenly belonging to a stranger. Hello, David, I said calmly. This is Michael Keller, Emily's husband. We were just getting acquainted. David's eyes darted to Michael, who had risen to his feet, standing slightly taller than my husband. Mr. Wells, Michael said, extending his hand with glacial politeness. David hesitated before shaking it, his confusion evident. How do you two know each other? We don't, I replied. Or we didn't until tonight, but we seem to have a lot in common. Please, join us. I'm sure Emily would like to be part of this conversation too. David's face paled. Becca, I can explain. Can you? I interrupted, my voice soft but firm. Can you explain the texts going back months? The lies about working late? The hotel receipts I found in your jacket pocket last night? This last part was a bluff. I hadn't found any receipts, but the flash of guilt in his eyes confirmed there would have been receipts to find had I looked. David glanced back at Emily, who was watching us with visible anxiety. This isn't the place for this conversation. I disagree, I said. This seems like the perfect place. After all, it's your spot, isn't it? That's what Emily called it in her text. Michael cleared his throat. Perhaps you should ask your colleague to join us, Mr. Wells. As Rebecca said, this concerns all of us. David looked trapped, his careful facade crumbling. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd always found endearing before, then nodded stiffly and walked back to Emily. I watched as he spoke to her, their heads bent close together in urgent conversation. She shook her head several times, but eventually, they both stood and made their way to our table. Hello, Emily, I said as they approached. Please, sit down. The waiter chose that moment to appear, looking uncertainly at our suddenly expanded party. We'll need 2 more settings, I told him with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. And perhaps another round of drinks. I think we'll all need them. Once the waiter left, an uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Emily stared at her hands, her wedding ring glinting in the low light. David kept glancing between Michael and me, as if trying to gauge how much we knew, how this impossible situation had come to be. How did you find out? Emily finally asked, looking directly at Michael. Rebecca told me, he replied simply. About an hour ago. She thought I deserved to know. Emily's eyes snapped to me, a mixture of anger and shame coloring her cheeks. How could I what? I cut in, my voice steady. Tell your husband that you've been sleeping with mine? That seems like the wrong question, Emily. The question is, how could you? David placed a hand on Emily's arm, a protective gesture that sent a wave of nausea through me. This isn't how I wanted you to find out, he said to me. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. And how exactly did you want me to find out, David? Or was I never supposed to know? Were you planning to continue living this double life indefinitely? It's complicated, he said, the cliché falling between us like a lead weight. No, I countered. It's actually very simple. You made vows to me. You broke them. You lied to my face, day after day. There's nothing complicated about betrayal. Michael, who had been quiet, suddenly addressed Emily. Why? He asked, the single word containing a universe of hurt. Was it something I did? Something I didn't do? Emily finally looked up, tears welling in her eyes. It wasn't about you, Michael. It just happened. We didn't plan it. Things don't just happen, I said. Affairs require decisions, hundreds of them. Every text, every lie about working late, every hotel room. Those were choices you both made, knowing they would destroy the people who loved you. David reached across the table toward my hand, but I pulled back before he could touch me. Becca, I know I've hurt you. I never wanted to. I love you. Don't. I cut him off sharply. Don't you dare say you love me. Not now. The waiter returned with drinks and additional place settings, the normalcy of his actions creating a surreal contrast to the emotional devastation at our table. We all fell silent until he left. "What happens now?" Emily asked quietly. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was beautiful in an effortless way, with a vulnerability in her expression that probably drew people to her. I could see why. David had been attracted to her, but in that moment all I felt was pity. "That depends," I said, looking between David and Emily. "Are you in love with each other?" They exchanged a quick glance, a private communication that twisted like a knife in my chest. "I don't know," David admitted. "We haven't talked about the future." Michael made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a scoff. "How convenient. All the pleasure of an affair with none of the responsibility of actually deciding what you want." "What about you, Emily?" I pressed. "Are you planning to leave Michael for my husband?" She flinched at the directness of the question. I haven't thought that far ahead." "Well, perhaps you should start thinking about it," I said, rising from my chair. "Because as of this moment, David won't be coming home to me." David stood quickly. "Becca, please." "No," I said firmly. "I didn't come here tonight for a reconciliation, David. I came for clarity. And now I have it." I turned to Michael, who was watching me with a mixture of admiration and his own unfolding grief. "Thank you for meeting me tonight. I'm sorry it had to be under these circumstances." Michael stood as well, straightening his shoulders. "I should be thanking you, Rebecca, for having the courage to bring this into the light." I gathered my purse, then looked one last time at David and Emily, who sat frozen in their chairs, the consequences of their choices finally catching up to them. "I've booked a room at the Westbrook Hotel tonight," I told David. "Tomorrow, I'll be back to pack my things. I'd appreciate it if you weren't there." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked toward the exit, my steps becoming steadier with each foot forward. Behind me, I could hear David calling my name, but I didn't look back. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin. I stood for a moment on the sidewalk, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of the past 11 years both pressing down on me and simultaneously lifting away. A text chimed on my phone. "Michael, thank you for tonight. For the truth, however painful. Would you like company for a drink? No expectations, just two people who understand each other's pain." I considered his offer. There was something appealing about not being alone tonight, about sitting with someone who truly understood the unique anguish of betrayal. But I knew I needed time with my own thoughts first, to begin the process of untangling myself from the life I'd built with David. "Another time, perhaps," I typed back. "Tonight I need to be with myself." His response came quickly. "I understand. When you're ready for that drink, you know how to reach me." I slipped my phone back into my purse and walked to my car, each step carrying me further from the life I'd known and closer to whatever lay ahead. The night stretched before me, full of uncertainty but also possibility, a blank canvas waiting for the first brushstroke of my new beginning. As I drove away from Maison Laurent, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me was changed, wounded but not broken, her eyes clear and determined. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time ever, I was fully awake to my own strength. Tomorrow would bring practical matters, lawyers, separation of assets, telling friends and family. But tonight, in this moment, I had done what needed to be done. I had faced the truth and survived it. And in that survival was a kind of victory. The road ahead was long and unknown, but for the first time in days, I felt something like peace. Not happiness, that would come later, but the quiet satisfaction of having stood up for myself when it mattered most, of having chosen truth over comfortable lies. I drove into the night, alone but not lonely, carrying with me the knowledge that I was stronger than the betrayal that had tried to define me. And in that strength, I would rebuild.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.